Are you dealing with an inexplicable problem, a challenge, a difficulty, sickness, or something like that? And you've tried everything that you know how, and it just didn't work. You've prayed, you've studied God's word about it, and still no resolution. And as far as you can see, there's no explanation for why God isn't resolving this thing. So here's a tale of two women in the Bible that has shed some light on this thing for me. The first one is the widow of Zarephath in 1 Kings 17. Picking up with verse 17 is where her son gets sick and then he dies. And the woman comes to Elijah and she's like almost accusing him, have you come to bring my sin to remembrance and to kill my son? And so he told her to bring her son to him, who's dead now. And Elijah carries the child upstairs to his own bed and lays the child on his bed. And then he cried out to the Lord and he said, "O Lord, my God, have you also brought tragedy on the widow with whom I lodged by killing her son?" And he stretched himself out on the child, not once, not twice, 3 times. And he cried out to the Lord and said, "O Lord, my God, I pray, let this child's soul come back to him." And I'm thinking, most of the miracles in the Bible, they did one thing. They spoke the word or touched the person and they were healed. But here's Elijah. He's done many great works, many miracles, and yet he does the thing. He lays himself out on the child the first time and nothing happens. So then he tries it again. He lays himself out again, and then he gets up, and still nothing. And it's wondering, there's, plenty of room for him to be thinking, I'm failing here. What's going on? God, have you forsaken me? Am I doing something wrong here? But then he does it the 3rd time, and he gets up, and still nothing. But then, after the 3rd time, after Elijah persisted and kept at it and did not get discouraged and persisted, then the Lord heard the voice of Elijah and the soul of the child came back to him and he revived. And very similar story with the woman of Shunammite in 2 Kings 4. And so then the story picks up in verse 18. Once again, it's very similar. The child died. And Elisha is some distance away, so the woman goes to him right away. She doesn't even tell her husband. It sounds like she doesn't even tell her husband what's happened. And she just goes, and then in verse 27, now when she came to the man of God at the hill, she caught him by the feet. So she's obviously fallen down on the ground, caught him by the feet, and Gehazi, Elisha's servant, apparently thinks that she's lost her mind or something, and he comes near to push her away. But the man of God said, "Let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress." And notice this, "And the Lord has hidden it from me, and he has not told me." Friends, when I read that, it just kind of got me right in the stomach, because I don't know about you, but I feel like that sometimes. Like what Elisha expressed here, the Lord has hidden it from me. And here we have the prophet of God, one of the great prophets of the Bible, experience the same thing. And that gives me some courage to know that I'm not alone. I'm in good company. And he tells Gehazi, "Get yourself ready and take my staff in your hand and be on your way. Lay my staff on the face of the child." And Gehazi goes and he does it. He laid the staff on the face of the child, and what happens? There was neither voice nor hearing. Therefore he went back to meet him and told Elisha, saying, "The child is not awakened." So here, once again, we're faced with this same kind of situation that Elijah was. And there could be the temptation to get upset or to feel discouraged. So Elisha now comes to the house. Now he's there in person, and there was the child lying dead on his bed, and he went in therefore and shut the door behind the 2 of them. So it's just Elisha and the boy's body laying there The child is dead. And Elisha prayed to the Lord, and he went up and he lay on the child, just like Elijah did, and the flesh of the child became warm. So the child's still dead, but Elisha is warming the child up, and he gets up and nothing. So now we've got failure number 2. First is he tells his servant to go lay his staff on the child and nothing. Now Elisha comes and lays on the child and it's not working. So what does he do? He returned and he walked back and forth in the house. Now what does that sound to you like? Somebody walking back and forth. That sounds like pacing to me. Why do you pace? Because you're perplexed about something. You're in distress. You're faced with a dilemma. What do I do? Something isn't working. Something's gone really wrong. And you're pacing back and forth. And friends, here is the prophet of God in great distress, pacing back and forth. We're in good company, aren't we? And then he goes up again, stretches himself out on him again, and then the child sneezed 7 times. The child opened his eyes. I think we've got some good lessons from this that we can apply to our struggles, our perplexities, our times where it feels like we are failing and where it feels like God is hiding the answer from us. And I look at story after story in the Bible where it's the same thing. Elijah on Mount Carmel praying for rain 7 times. How do you think he felt after the 6th prayer? Naaman in the Jordan River 7 times he was supposed to dip under. Why wasn't 1 time good enough? Jesus and the Canaanite woman, and really even Jesus' parable of the importunate widow. Both of these ladies were persistent. They had an honorable request, and since neither of them had been given a clear no, there had been no closed door for them, they persisted, even though it probably felt like they were failing and like it was pointless, and they should just give up. But they persisted in pushing through. And so I come to the life of Christ, and I want to read you this profound statement that was just earth-shattering for me. From Testimonies, Volume 6, page 307. As the world's Redeemer, Christ was constantly confronted with apparent failure. He seemed to do little of the work which he longed to do in uplifting and saving. Satanic agencies were constantly working to obstruct his way, but he would not be discouraged. This is the key, friends. Jesus would not be discouraged, even though outward appearances and perhaps even his own feelings were saying otherwise. He would not be discouraged. Now listen to this. The life of Christ's disciples is to be like his, a series of uninterrupted victories, not seen to be as such here, but recognized as such in the great hereafter. That's what our life is going to be like, is to be like. That's what our Master's life was like, where we're going to have many times where it feels and looks like we're failing and we're in perplexity and it feels like God is hiding the answer from us. But we need to trace our path from the past. And if we're convinced that our last clear message from God was that we need to be doing this, then we need to persist in pushing forward until either God opens the door or until he gives us a clear no. And believe me, God is able to convince us. If we honestly want to know the truth, God will make it clear what his will is. And then I want to finish up with this from Prophets and Kings, page 595. Sometimes he trains his workers by bringing to them disappointment and apparent failure. It is his purpose that they shall learn to master difficulties. Often men are tempted to falter before the perplexities and obstacles that confront them. But if they will hold the beginning of their confidence steadfast unto the end, God will make the way clear. So once again, if we hearken back to the last clear information that we had from God, even if it feels like God is hiding the answer from us right now, we can still look back to how he has led us in the past and look back to that last waymark, and then we need to just pursue that path until God shows us otherwise. If they will hold the beginning of their confidence steadfast unto the end, God will make the way clear. Success will come to them as they struggle against difficulties. So friends, there's our marching orders. May God go with each one of us through this week and help us to persevere, to not fail or be discouraged, and to hold the beginnings of our confidence steadfast unto the end. Have a good week.